A journalist boards a plane while listening to a podcast about their missing grandfather. Thus, he will try to do the impossible to avoid his inevitable fate. That's why today, the Twilight Zone episode 2 of season 1. As you saw, we're already close to reaching 900,000 subscribers. So remember, if you like the videos, you can support the channel by liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications. It's free and truly helps me grow. Let's get started. The story begins during the routine security screening they do at airports before boarding a plane. There we meet our protagonist, Justin Sanderson, who, after going through the infrared machine, is stopped by a security guard for an additional physical check. Out of options, he agrees, and the man begins checking his clothes. After a few suspenseful seconds, they let him go, so he grabs his suitcase to continue on his way. At Datsy Free's estate, he notices an interesting magazine and reaches for it, but bumps into another man trying to do the same. They apologize, and the stranger recognizes him from a recent televised debate. The protagonist gives him the magazine as a gift, and the man, whose name is Joe, feels very honored since it's the first time he's met a writer in person. That's why he asks him for an autograph and then leaves. Minutes later, a woman who works for the airline announces that the flight to Tel Aviv is about to depart while Justin stops to make a call. When he contacts his wife, he apologizes for their earlier argument, and she says he's breaking his promise to her. The writer tells her he's improving his life by taking this business trip, which will reduce his stress. And while he walks through the boarding lounge, we can notice that there's a terrible thunderstorm outside. In the conversation, the protagonist says he saw disturbing things in Yemen, so researching in Tel Aviv will be much easier. His wife tells him the past is over. Then something unusual catches his attention. His flight is 10:15. Today is October 15th, and departure was delayed to 10:15 p.m. Although it seems crazy, he ignores it. When boarding, he asks the pilot if he had a good flight. He gives up his first-class seat to a boy who was about to be separated from his family due to a mistake. He ends up in the cheapest area, and as he looks around, we see Joe is also on this flight. Later, a stranger sits in Justin's row, and he's intrigued by an old MP3 player on the seat. He immediately plugs some headphones into it and discovers that it's a kind of podcast talking about the mystery of Flight 1015. The host talks about a storm that just so happens to be happening at this very moment. He says the plane will vanish from the control tower in under an hour and no one will hear from it again. As the plane takes off, the host appears and introduces our protagonist, dedicated to uncovering the real truth. So he will have to ask the right questions to the right people right before the disaster that will come in an hour. Protagonist. He hears on the podcast that the most striking thing is the number of details related to the disappearance of the flight. Captain Dollar interestingly shares his name with his flight's pilot. Hearing this, he asks the man beside him to help interpret what the podcast says about an alleged accident. But the passenger doesn't take him seriously and decides to find another seat far away from him. A woman beside him smiles, and Justin continues listening to the audio about the captain notifying the control tower of an incident. The incident? Which one? In aviation, that's a warning sign of trouble ahead. At 10:21, we see a bird strike the plane's engine. Our protagonist jumps in fright, but the rest of the passengers don't know what's happening. He rushes to the bathroom, repeating his wife's mantra to calm himself and feel better. A few minutes later, he returns to his seat to call a flight attendant and asks if he can consult the pilot. Regarding a bird strike, this man says there are no animals at this altitude. Because of the fear, Justin starts to get agitated, but he quickly calms down and looks out the window again. Afterwards, Joe comes over to tell him that he used to work as a pilot and that he made irreparable mistakes, so he can't fly anymore. He also tells him he believes something happened with a bird, but the crew would never tell this information to the passengers, so there's no way to confirm it. With a bit of fear, the writer plays the podcast again, where the host narrates the captain's last words to the control tower. They were, "Good night, New York." And he confirms that the disappearance of the plane happened at 11:15, that is in 45 minutes during the flight. 117 people are presumed dead after a plane vanished in the North Atlantic with no forensic evidence. That's why it's important to look for patterns or clues that might provide an answer. After hearing this, Justin decides to analyze every detail. In this case, the passengers can see the cockpit through security cameras that are broadcast on several monitors. If the pilot acts unusually, everyone will probably notice. The announcer suggests the possibility that something on board could disrupt the plane's communication system. As our protagonist searches the aisles for answers, he asks some passengers to turn off their phones, but they reply they're in this airplane mode. If he keeps insisting, a flight attendant must approach to help calm him down. As he continues playing the podcast episode, he learns about a Russian citizen named Igor, who is on the passenger list. He's in witness protection and traveling to testify against the Russian mafia. Our protagonist knows this mafia is capable of anything, so he approaches to observe him more closely. He then learns a federal agent is also there, likely assigned to protect Igor and respond to any threat on the plane. Justin asks Zapata to speak with the federal air marshal, but she says she really doesn't know if there is one on board and asks him to sit down again. Returning to his seat, he encounters Joe again and asks if he's the federal agent, but the pilot denies it. He tells him the only way to reveal the undercover agent is to act like a terrorist, forcing the agent to intervene. After some time, Justin returns to the Russian passenger seat to check his suitcase, careful not to wake him. The others watch him, confused about his actions. When he opens the overhead compartment, a suitcase accidentally falls out, waking one of the men. This angers the passenger, and Justin warns them the Russian mafia wants to kill Igor, making the plane tense. Suddenly, the real man, under witness protection, starts acting like a cop, and the captain has to come out to calm the situation. Things spiral out of control when other passengers begin recording our protagonist's actions. And when he realizes this, he decides to go back to his seat. Hello, friends?
Sorry for the inconvenience. Please return to your seats and enjoy.
As the podcast continues, Justin is even more surprised because the host talks about the latest suspect in the disappearance of the plane. It's about an investigative reporter who turns out to be himself. As if that wasn't enough, he mentions videos showing him causing a commotion. That's exactly what happened and was uploaded to the internet minutes before the tragedy. Captain insists on speaking to him, believing he's having a psychotic episode. He tells him that though it sounds crazy, he knows he's about to say, "Good night, New York," and begs him not to, as those will be the last words from the plane. No one understands. "Captain, do you think he's threatening you?" That's why the woman who smiled at him at first, later revealed as the air marshal, appears to arrest him as a suspected terrorist. The officer then tells him podcasts can't predict the future, they won't disappear, and someone will meet him at the airport to help. He admits to past emotional crises, which is why he knows this time is completely different. He now feels stuck in the past and says he has proof for everything he claims. But she just insists that he must accept he has a mental problem so he can recover. Right then, the captain approaches her to talk in private, and our protagonist can see when another MP3 device falls, of dedication that finding out about it and sending the If there had been Tomum, world, everything is possible. Justin insists he's not mentally ill and tells his new friend he could land the plane in Canada before it disappears, thanks to his experience. Joe mentions a security code that all cockpits have, but in this case, it's unknown. For everyone who isn't part of the crew, after a few minutes, Justin concludes the code is 1015, and Joe agrees, on the condition that they lower the pressure so all the passengers fall asleep and they don't have to deal with them. Before leaving, Joe gives him a special mask so he can stay awake. He reminds him that he's helping save hundreds of souls. Afterward, the pilot heads to the control room, enters easily, and we see a fight on the monitors. The other passengers grow upset, so Joe quickly introduces himself as the new pilot. The flight attendants try to calm everyone, and the federal agents try to stop him. but can't as the pressure quickly affects them. While everyone sleeps, our protagonist walks down the plane aisle and hears Joe thank him for showing that the past can't be recovered and he'll never be the same man again. Joe, fully in control of the aircraft, contacts the control tower to say goodnight, New York, then lies down on the seat. Justin realizes he is the true culprit and played a role in causing the tragedy. But the story continues. As hours later, our protagonist wakes up on a beach. Surrounded by luggage and plane wreckage in the water, Justin is amazed he survived. Most remarkably, the MP3 device still works, letting him hear part 2 of the Flight 1015 Mystery Podcast. That's how we find out that the rescuers worked for months searching for survivors, but they didn't find anything. A cargo ship passing a small island discovered that everyone from Flight 1015 survived except one. No one could explain it, but Justin vanished. Hearing this, our protagonist sees a boy before him. But the boy is not alone. Within seconds, the other surviving passengers appear, upset about the accident and blaming our protagonist. That's why they surround him, and Justin grabs a rock to defend himself, saying he tried to save the plane. No one believes him, so they all beat him up. The host says Justin, though an investigative journalist, didn't want to investigate himself. He learned that good intentions can lead to trouble, and that everything is tied to knowledge itself. This was episode 2 of the first season of The Twilight Zone. Remember to like, comment which movies you want next, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos.